Hello everyone and welcome to Wild Stories. My name is Liam Wild and I'm super excited to get this started. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Today is the first wild story. It's probably not the first ever wild story, but it's the first one that I'll be posting on YouTube and all my other socials. I'm super excited to build something, and I think that the first story is going to be a tone setter. It's the Misogi, the story of the Misogi, the Japanese myth that became the modern day ritual. Now, just to kind of like pre-frame everything, it's the middle of January right now of 2026, and 45% of people from the data have quit their New Year's resolution by the end of January. So I don't know, my lucky guess would be about 30% of people have already, ended their New Year's resolution. The resolution didn't work. They missed a couple days in the gym. They were snacking at past midnight, whatever it was, right? And that tends to be the case with resolutions. They just don't end up lasting. And I think a part of that is society's like, oh, this is your New Year's resolution. You're going to get this done, right? And then once we get closer to February and everyone gets in the groove of the new year, it's okay to just kind of kick your feet back and go back into autopilot. But, the people that really want to get things done, a resolution, it can work. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying for a lot of people, it's not really something that has too much substance to it anymore. And once a year, instead of a resolution, if you put your focus into something super hard where you knew that there was a chance to fail, but it was like, I'm gonna just go do it anyways. It's a challenge. That resonated with me a little bit more. I was never too into the resolution stuff. People would ask me, so what's your New Year's resolution? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I've always been someone that's a little bit more goal oriented rather than I'm gonna, stop this or, do that to make myself look more attractive or, feel smarter or whatever. Like, because if you say, hey, I'm gonna read a book a month, and then you don't read a book a month, then your resolution is done, right? So I really like this idea, and where our story comes from, the Misogi, it comes from Shintoism, which is an ancient Japanese mythology. And I and many others have used this philosophy in modern day. Today I'm going to share the story of how the Misogi came to be. It's a story that's rooted in really, really ancient mythology that's actually older than the Bible. It was 300 BCE is where this story comes from, and it's about gods, creation, grief, rage, and renewal. The blossoming that comes through hardship. And in Shintoism, which is actually historically from the history books, I guess, Japan's indigenous faith, the Misogi was derived from this creation story. And I'll tell the origin story of the Misogi, but I'm also going to tell the story of how I learned of the Misogi and what inspired me to actually do it and who inspired me to take that leap, as well as my first Misogi, which was last year, and what I learned from it. And I'll also, maybe, I guess, give some insight to if you want to start your Misogi, kind of where to start. So, without further ado, let's get to the origin story. Part 1. It all starts with Izanagi and Izanami. In Shinto mythology, we have Izanagi. This is the male creator god. So if it starts with a Izana, it means who invites. So Izanagi, it stands for he who invites, and then Izanami, so ending with a mi, is she who invites. So they're like brother, sibling, husband, wife. I don't know if it really specifies in this. To be honest, I've read that they're siblings, and then I've also read that they're husband and wife. I'll let you interpret that from the story, whatever they are. But the setting of where we're going to start this story off is on a floating bridge of heaven. Beautiful, right? What better place to start a story? The floating bridge of heaven. But when I think of this graphically in my mind, if I close my mind, it says it stirred the chaos with a jeweled spear. So they're creating Earth, they're creating the universe. So it's just gas and stars, and they have this jeweled spear. And in the story, what they're doing with this spear is they're actually sculpting out the land and the mountains with this spear. And together they gave birth to Japan's islands. This is important because, of course, this is Japanese mythology, but Japan has many different gods. And in their ancient text, these gods come from this story where the drops from the spear created these islands, and in this story they also created gods. So gods are kami, so Kami, but creating these gods and these islands and these mountains and Japan, it did come at a cost in the story. And this is where the grief and the rage will come from. But Izanami, she died in this story. She died giving birth to Gagutsuchi, the god of fire. She was fatally injured. It's a rough way to go. Childbirth, death from the god of fire. Oof, yeah, no wonder she was fatally injured. Grief followed, rage followed, and a lot of this was on Izanagi. This enters into part 2 where death entered the world. You have to think they're the creators of the world, so there was no such thing as death at that point in time. Like, death had never entered the world. So in Shintoism, Yomi is the land of the dead. And this gets us into part 2. So to me, I think of like the land of the dead. I think of like hell or like The Walking Dead. I challenge you to just like interpret this however you think the land of Yomi would look like. But according to Shinto mythology, the land of the dead, called Yomi, is where Izanagi went because he had made a promise to Izanami. He said that when she died, that he would go to Yomi and he would bring her back to the land of the living. Well, she had passed and she had went to Yomi, and he followed. But once he found her in the land of the dead, he broke this promise of bringing her back. He realized it was impossible. He saw her. She was dead, but in the story, she's living in the land of the dead. So she's like decayed. In my mind, I'm just thinking of her as like a zombie, right? Just like, but with burn wounds in an unfavorable place. But once he found her and he knew that promise could not be upheld, he had, first he had fear of where he saw in the land of Yomi that Izanami was no longer what she was of what he knew. And he had shame that he never was able to save her. And Izanami declared to him, now in the land of the death, is that she will kill 1,000 people a day. So in my mind, she's turning into like this villain. She's got this like villain arc now. She's like, well, I'm the first person to die. I'm going to kill everybody else. Might as well have some company here in Yomi, which it does kind of sound like hell, but I don't think Yomi was necessarily bad for hell. I think It's just a different thing. Yomi is very much its own entity in that sense. Where Izanagi replied, he said, well, if you're going to kill 1,000 people a day, then I'm going to ensure that 1,500 are born. So this is how Shintoism created the idea and the concept of life and death becoming eternal opposites and the balance with it, which I think is it's pretty beautiful when you think about that, especially that there's more being born, which I don't know in this day and age. I think more people might be dying than being born on average. I've heard about population collapse and all that, but let's get on to part 3, which is really what I really want to touch on, which is purification through discomfort, the Misogi. After escaping Yomi, Izanagi performed Misogi, a ritual cleansing in a frozen river or waterfall. He did this because it was cold, brutal, and standing under these waterfalls and entering these freezing rivers, it made him face nature. But more importantly, it made him face himself. The act of the Misogi purified him, and in return, 3 new precious godchildren were born. I say godchildren because I'll say the names here. I'm probably going to butcher them. Amaterasu, which is the sun. So that created the sun. The Misogi created the sun by Izanagi going in there. And then Tsukuyomi, the moon, and Susanoo, storms in the sea. So the sun, the moon, the storms in the sea got created by going into these freezing rivers and waterfalls to endure that hardship. He was rewarded with the sun, the moon, the storms, and the sea. What this really shows is that the Misogi allows for a reset, that through purifying yourself and enduring hardship, you're able to not necessarily let go of your past, but blossom a future that is filled with lessons to cherish for life. And in Shintoism, the belief is that true renewal only comes through discomfort. And I think that's really powerful. That true renewal only comes through discomfort. And I mean, I think about like people when they make huge physical changes. Like what comes to mind is like Jelly Roll. You know, guys almost 500 pounds or something like that. And his story is pretty incredible. But going through that discomfort of, you know, walking every day till eventually running and, you know, knowing that he was so out of shape and that it was really hard for him to, from like an emotional and a confidence level to even, you know, go out and walk. But he's a renewed person. He's got a new lease on life because of that discomfort he went through. So true renewal only comes through discomfort. I think that's so powerful. Let's talk a little bit more because that's the origin story of how the Misogi has entered into the modern world and a little bit into Western society. So the Misogi means today is that once a year, instead of necessarily calling it a New Year's resolution, do one thing so hard, there's a 50-50 chance you fail it. It's not necessarily like this new habit I'm stacking, you know, or this resolution, but it's a line in the sand. It's like, I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to go out there and, you know, try my best. And if I fail, I do, right? Rather than the resolution being like, well, you know, I hope to get a little bit better. I hope to stop drinking, and then someone offers you some wine and you're like, Oh, well, wasn't your New Year's resolution, to quit drinking? Yeah, but whoever sticks with a resolution. I seriously think that mindset in our culture, it is prevalent and it doesn't help people. Whereas this Misogi, just calling it different, I think helps. I don't think it's the biggest thing. It's going to come down to you and your mindset. But when I first heard of this line in the sand, 50-50, you fail, you have to do something super hard, and this is your challenge for the year, and the moment of punctuation is getting into something really cold. And that's what I did yesterday. I jumped in the lake. It's January. It's Canada. It was freezing. It wasn't comfortable. But that moment of punctuation where I'm starting this Misogi, and that really, it's telling us, like, this is, okay, it's happening now. I learned this from listening to a podcast at the end of 2024 going into 2025. Jesse Itzler, he's an entrepreneur. I'd say he's an athlete. He's done all these ventures. He wrote the book called Living with a Navy SEAL, where he invited David Goggins to live with him for a month. And I was listening to a podcast with him on there, and he was talking about, I don't do a resolution, I do a Misogi. And he was talking a little bit about it, and one of his stories really inspired me. He said, he's an endurance runner, right? Does these races, and he said, I wanted to run 100 miles in 24 hours. Well, me thinking about that, like, I'm not inspired to go run 100 miles in 24 hours. I'm like, I'm a former athlete. I've done, like, the football stuff, sprinting, but that's not necessarily what I'm into. But it was really the story behind the 100 miles in 24 hours. He said he had trained, but he couldn't get past the 38 miles. The 38 miles was the block for him. And he must have a lot of Navy SEAL friends, because Chad Wright and the Mental Rule. So Chad Wright, he's a former Navy SEAL, got this big old beard from the Appalachians. I think he's like from Georgia. Just a savage, right? And he's done some pretty amazing things. If you want to go check him out, I don't know if he has a podcast or anything out. I've just listened to some podcasts with him in as a guest. But Chad gave Jesse some rules to get past that block of 38 miles. He said, the first one is, we do not give pain a voice. Negative thoughts, they'll come. Can I do this? Am I built for this? What if I fail? What if you do fail? Right? That's the Misogi. It's 50-50. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Right? But the moment you say it out loud, the moment that you give that negative thought power, you're defeating yourself. So he said, never say a negative thought out loud. They gain power. And Chad said, on top of that, that if ever you're having negative thoughts and someone's going to talk to you about, like, say, how are you doing? You're on mile 37. How are you doing? Obviously not that great, but you're going to say outstanding. So whenever these negative thoughts come in, you're going to ask yourself, how are you doing? Outstanding. How are you doing? Outstanding. And I think the message there is that the power of self-talk, positive self-talk, can go so far, especially with accomplishing big, hard goals. It's so crucial. And what I find is interesting about just talking about the Navy SEAL thing with Chad Wright is that I think a lot of the, like, David Goggins and Jocko Willink, they do the same things. It's like these people that have extreme mental toughness are able to have just amazing positive self-talk in, bad situations. You've maybe seen the video. I'll actually add it to the description of the YouTube video. Jocko Willink saying, when things go wrong, good, right? And when he had, I think, a private come up to him. He was going to ask him a question or gave him like some bad news. And Jocko said, good. And he was like, I knew you were going to say that. Right? Because if you keep on saying it, then like your mindset is just, it's formidable. No one's going to be able to tarnish that if that's how you're responding to every bad situation. It's like, good, all right. What are we going to have to do to, keep going? Good. This makes us, like tougher. Good. Like I'll have to learn from this experience. This is going to move on to me kind of bringing it home with my Misogi and a little bit about my experience and my story. My story is that last year when I listened to that podcast, I was about a year into a company where I'd been pretty successful. I was in sales, and I had come in, I was doing lead generation, qualifying. I had actually gotten promoted pretty early on because I set records. I set records in the company, and I was showing them that I was a leader. I wanted to do great things, and I ended up getting the President's Award in my first year. And what they had said is that they wanted to start a door-to-door team at the end of the year. And I was like, well, if you know me, I've knocked on a lot of doors in my life. Even coming from high school, I've been knocking on doors for a long time. I've had thousands and thousands of conversations, a lot of them negative, some really positive ones. Some that, I'll never forget, which is amazing. I still get, some people that I sold something to at their door years ago message me recently at Christmas time, which was really cool. It's like, how do you even remember me? But this door-to-door team, I knew that professionally I wanted to, get a little bit outside my comfort zone. I had been like on teams before, tried to, been a leader, but I'd never fully done it, like starting my own door-to-door team. And I said I was going to do it. That was my Misogi. I said, I'm going to do this. I told my partner, and that's important, starting Misogi, is that you got to tell somebody in order to, keep yourself accountable. You don't have to, but it definitely helps. And, the thing about the Misogi is that it's a line in the sand. So you either, win, or it's a success, or it's a failure, right? But the thing about it as well is that even in failures, you can have successes, especially when it's something that's about 365 days long. There's a lot of silver lining. And that's what my experience with my first Misogi last year was, is that I learned so much, I grew as a person, and, it's experience that is going to propel me. I already know that, and already has. But it was tough on me, and I don't think it was necessarily good to me in a lot of aspects. There was a lot of time on the road, basically working every day, trying to manage a team, create workshops, do trainings, check up on people. I was giving the game more than it was maybe than I was receiving from it. And sometimes that's how it goes. And, we did have really good times and successes. We, sold a lot, and it was with a lot of, really great people and great relationships that I, cherish. However, in the end, it kind of like it petered off. It was fleeting. The team, as the weather got, less warm and colder, the team grew smaller, and the sales kept on, like, they were coming through, but with less volume. And eventually it was, something that, didn't make as much sense to do anymore. It was like, we got to put a pause on this. We got to pivot. So there were successes, but, at the end of it, it was a failure. But that's okay. You can learn from these failures, and that's what the Misogi is all about, is that if it's a failure, as long as you gave it all you had, you're going to see success from it. You're going to see lessons that are going to help you. And the beautiful thing about it is that if you feel hard-headed and you just keep on going for it, even though you failed, then you don't know that it was your time to leave. Whereas the Misogi, if you feel like at the end it just kind of failed and whatever, it's like, well, that was the Misogi. I learned. Now it's time to do another one. I'm going to go purify myself. I'm going to go jump in the cold water and start a reset. So that's what brings me to my next Misogi. It's 2026. I just moved across the country from Nova Scotia to beautiful British Columbia, just jumped in that cold blue crystal water. And I've been wanting to do this for a long time, like create a community that inspires people, tell stories. So my Misogi this year is that I will do 100 wild stories on YouTube. So I will post 100 stories. It'll be 365 days. So I'm going to basically give it all of 2026. So 100 stories, not a small feat, but I have plenty of time to do it, and it'll be a labor of love. It'll be a labor of love. However, will it be good in the beginning? Probably by my 100th episode, I'll look back on this one and be like, dude, brutal, right? But if it's not brutal and if it's not painful in the beginning, is it worth really, doing? Because everything worth doing that has discomfort in the beginning, it's going to keep on being hard until it starts just getting easier. So I'll ask myself, hey, is this good even? Are people even, do people even care? Am I even going to be able to stay consistent with this? I'm just going to say, hey, whatever I put out there, it's outstanding. It's good. It's fine. I want to give people a voice to just, believe in themselves to start something really hard. And hopefully my Misogi this year will maybe inspire some people through some storytelling. But, even if it doesn't inspire you, hopefully you feel something else. Maybe you get some laughs out of these stories. Maybe you cry, feel all these different emotions. That's honestly the mission here, is that, you feel something. We all feel a little bit more human from stories. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish with Wild Stories here. So just to close this off, is that if you're thinking about doing Misogi, you should go jump in that cold water, or find a waterfall or your shower or whatever it is. Write it down on a piece of paper. You have to write it down. If you don't write it down, you're going to forget about it. It's going to fly off. But if you write it down, maybe put it up on your wall in your bedroom, see it every day or something, you're going to be reminded of the mission. And tell your friends. It's going to keep you accountable as well. And call it a Misogi. It's not a resolution. And just know it's something hard enough where it's 50-50. Right? So my Misogi this year, it's 100 stories. There's no excuses. There's no backing out. Follow, subscribe, and watch me do it.